G'day, great to be coming to you, Gympie.Church Online. Been a few weeks already, hasn't it? And likely to be for quite some time yet. But it's a joy to be with you as you continue to tune in and be encouraged. I want to read to you from the book of Exodus, and this will be a very familiar passage. But hear these words. And the Lord said, I have surely seen the affliction of my people who are in Egypt, and have given heed to their cry because of their taskmasters, for I am aware of their sufferings. So I have come down to deliver them from the power of the Egyptians, and to bring them up from the land to a good and spacious land, to a land flowing with milk and honey, to a place of the Canaanite and the Hittite and the Amorite and the Perizzite and the Hivite and the Jebusite. And now behold, the cry of the sons of Israel has come to me. Furthermore, I have seen the oppression with which the Egyptians are oppressing them. Therefore, come now, and I will send you to Pharaoh, so that you may bring my people, the sons of Israel, out of Egypt. And Moses said to God, Who am I, that I should go to Pharaoh, and that I should bring the sons of Israel out of Egypt? And God said, Certainly I will be with you, and this shall be the sign to you that it is I who have sent you. When you have brought the people out of Egypt, you shall worship God at this mountain. Well, it's a fascinating few verses. And as I've reflected on that, this is not exactly a desert scene, but I thought I'd do my best to have a kind of like a tree or a bush behind me, and I thought I'd wear my hat because I suspect that Moses would have been in the sun when God spoke to him. And so as we reflect on these few verses, we understand that God hears the cry of his people. And I wonder whether you really believe that today God is hearing the cries of his people. I believe he is. I really do. And I believe he is doing what he did for Moses. He is sending his people, his church, you and I, to counsel, to care for, to encourage the people who are in Egypt, at least symbolically. They're in a hard place. They're doing it tough. But God hears the cry of his people. I want to suggest to you just very quickly this morning that we have to accept God's lead in our life, just as Moses did, somewhat reluctantly at first, admittedly, but he accepted what God wanted him to do. Yes, he had his excuses. Yes, he tried to get out of it, as we often do. But ultimately, he said, okay, I'll go. And I hope and pray that that might be our plea, that our response. Okay, God, I don't really understand, but I'll go. I'll be that person for you. I'll accept your lead. And, as I read through that passage, I discover that Moses had to not only accept God's lead in his life, but he had to find a way to abandon the load that he was carrying. He was no goody-goody. He'd murdered a person. He'd fled Egypt. He was hiding, looking for cover, so to speak, and God confronts him with a burning bush. Well, I'm not going to set this bush behind me on fire, but you understand. Gets Moses' attention, and we know the story. But Moses had to abandon that which he had done, and I guess in a sense who he was, because God called him to go on his behalf to save his people in another place. And in order to do that, he had to accept God's lead. He had to abandon his load and allow God to load him up. And it's the same with us. We need to abandon that which restricts us from hearing his voice, from proclaiming his message, from doing that which he calls us to do. We all have baggage. And I believe God is telling us in this time, when we have more time on our hands, most of us, he is telling us to get rid of that stuff which restricts us from entering into the fullness of the promised land for you and for me and for us. And then he had to apply the light. Well, that's what I'm calling it. Yes, he sort of said, well, who am I? And God said, well, it was a really interesting response. He didn't actually say, well, I'll answer your question. He just said, I want you to go, and this will be the sign that you have done what I've asked you to do. When you bring the people out, come up to this mountain and you can worship me. Interesting response when you think about it. Didn't really tell him the how to or anything really. He just said, when you've done it, come and worship me. I wonder whether that might be sometimes his comment to us today. I want you to do what I've asked you to do. And when you've done it, come back to me and worship me. And no doubt he'll give you something else then. You see, the reality is that just like a light switch in your room, in your kitchen, bedroom, wherever it might be, you can see the light. You can look above and say, yes, I have a light in this room. It's there. I can see it. But until you turn on the switch, it has no bearing. And you see, God gives us his light by his Spirit, and we have it. Scripture reminds us that if you've given your life to Jesus, then we have his Spirit within us. It's there. The light is there, but we have to turn it on. Moses had to turn it on, and when he did, wow, what a result. And that same concept is true for us today. So take some kudos from Moses. He was an ordinary, well, actually he probably wasn't real ordinary. He was a bad dude. But God turned him around, and God used him to care for and to release his people. Who are the people that God is calling you and I and us as his church to go to release, to bring out into their promised land? God bless you. Have a great day. Been great talking to you. Until next time, go with God.